and welcome to today's webinar, The One Thing for Your Personal Life, sponsored by The One Thing. My name is Ian, and I'll be your host today. Everyone except the speaker and I will be on mute, but we encourage you to interact with our speaker throughout our presentation by typing in questions and comments using the questions pane. We will be answering questions live after the presentation. If you'd like to join the conversation on Twitter, the hashtag and our Twitter handles are listed in the current slide. We would love to have you connect with us and keep the conversation going during and beyond today's webinar. Also, we're recording today's session and we will make the link to the recording available within 24 hours via email. Now on to today's speaker. We're excited to have Jay Papasan with us today. Jay is a former editor at HarperCollins Publishers, is co-author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller The One Thing and multiple other books. He's vice president of publishing at Keller Williams Realty. He's also a frequent event speaker and corporate trainer. Thanks for being with us today, Jay.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Ian. Really appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy days to join us. And I think before we actually kick it off, you want to ask a quick poll question. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Before we begin, if you could please answer the poll question that will show up on your screen. I'll give you a few moments to answer, and then we will get started.
All right, folks, you should be seeing it. Just click on the answer of what industry you're currently working in. When we get a few people to do that for us, we will get started.
Thanks for taking the time. And now, let's begin with our presentation. Back to you, Jay.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ian. All right, so today I want to definitely drill down a little bit on the one thing. A lot of the folks on this call, I'm sure, have hopefully read the book. You're familiar with some of the concepts, and you're familiar with the idea that in the book, in the chapter The Success Habit, in particular on page 114, we drill down into the 7 areas of your life that you can apply the one thing and build great, powerful habits in your life. Today, we're going to focus on your personal life. If you look at the circle, for us, the priorities begin at the 12 o'clock position. You know, it starts with your spiritual life, and everything builds from there. So if you don't know why you're here, it's a great question to answer. It goes to the second circle, your physical health. And, you know, if you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live? And the third priority is your personal life. Today we started with the personal life because it lines up with a lot of what's going on in our lives right now. For most of us that have children, they're going back to school, and we are feeling the conflicts and sometimes the counterbalancing we get to do in work and life pretty acutely during personal life, and we're really, really happy that you chose to join us. So just a quick recap in case people aren't completely familiar with the one thing message. I just want to talk about 3 slides and give you a sense of this is how it works. Fundamentally, the one thing is based on Pareto's principle, the idea that 80% of what you get comes from a minority, 20% of what you do. In our parlance, we want you to keep asking, what's the 20% of this equation? What's the 20% until you reduce it, not down to 20%, but down to the one thing that you need to do. It's something, it's a process that, you know, over time a lot of us have learned how to do and do better, but there's a reward on the other side. And the metaphor we use in the one thing is a domino run in your life, right? One domino can knock over many dominoes. In fact, we found research that a group out of the Netherlands had actually lined up 4.5 million dominoes and gotten them all to fall down by taking one simple action, just flicking over one domino to create that amazing domino run. And we also, as you see on your screen right now, we found a physicist who figured out that a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, and a 3-inch domino can knock over a 4.5-inch domino, that one domino can actually knock over another one that's 50% larger. So we understand now that when you create a domino run by identifying the one thing that you really should be focused on, not only can you get many you can also get more. Things can grow exponentially, and that's what we call getting a domino run in your life. So today, I want to talk about how can you create a domino run in your personal life, right? How can we take this concept, really a business book, and apply it to our personal life? So let's take a look at the focusing question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Let's just add the phrase, my personal life, into the middle of it. So for my personal life, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Just want to pause there for a second. I want you to think about that. Have you actually asked and answered this question for your life? A lot of times, especially for working moms, in my experience teaching this course, the last person they take care of is in fact themselves. The very fact that they're focused so much on their professional career, their children, possibly a spouse, the last person they attend to is themselves. And one of the great things that Gary shared when we were writing the book, because I was arguing, really, do I need to put my personal life in front of my key relationships? Is that really the right order to line these up? And he reminded me of what they say on the airplane, right? It's not put the oxygen mask on the child first, right? First, put the oxygen mask on yourself so that you can then attend to the person next to you. So there is a really good reason for doing this. If you don't do it, there's also a high cost. So what's the one thing you can do in your personal life such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary? I hope that you'll think about that, and maybe over the course of this short seminar, you'll write down some answers that might be viable solutions for you, because it's absolutely worth identifying that one thing and adding it to your life. And that'll be my challenge for you at the end of this. So what's the cost? What happens if you don't? Well, what we know is that research, people burn out not just by working too much. It's when they work so much that they feel like they have no life. They've no time left for them. And so research will tell you that not only do they, they've given everything for their job, and then as a result, they become disengaged from their work. What's the number one thing we want from the people we work with? We want them to be engaged, right? They're involved in the same problems we're trying to solve. They're trying to create the same amazing results in the world. And when they become disengaged, it affects the whole team. So we don't want that. We don't want that around us, and we don't want it for ourselves. Next, you have a much higher chance of having health problems. Simply working, I believe it's 55 hours a week, right? That's not even a huge day, especially if you work in real estate, where many of our friends do, can drastically increase the chances that you'll die from heart disease. So you've got to figure out a way to counterbalance this thing out. And lastly, people who really feel out of balance here often suffer from more depression than other people. So there's a high cost. So reflect for a moment. You've maybe hopefully come up with some answers. There's some things that you know, challenges in your personal life that maybe you could be doing more for yourself. The cost immediately can be that you're starting to feel worn out and stressed and frazzled. And right here on the screen are 3 costs that we know scientifically can happen if you don't address the problem over time, right? So here's what gets between us and actually finding a solution. And it's the 5th lie in the one thing. It's the idea that a balanced life is even possible. So we say a balanced life is a lie. So, in our seminars, we actually often ask people, and it's one of the ways to kind of make this point. If you were actually in a position, right, where you could stand up, I would invite you to stand up and try to stand on one leg for just one moment. And the question you ask yourself is, am I balanced right now, or am I balancing? It was a big aha for me when we were going through this. The idea of balance is really something that's been perpetrated on us, but we shouldn't think of it as this nirvana-like state that we achieve, a destination we get to arrive at, and then everything's at balance. It's actually a verb. It's something that we do, and that we do all the time. So, where did this idea come from? This is the rise of the work-life balance myth. And if you can see these details on your screen now, we looked at newspaper and magazine articles going back as far back as there were archives. And what we discovered is the idea of work-life balance doesn't even show up in our vernacular until the 1980s. And those of you who've heard me speak at one of my keynotes or seminars, you'll know that when we talk about this, we understand that something really big happened in the 70s. What happened was a huge percentage of women went from working at home to working in the office. And so this idea of being out of balance for at least the first decade was largely being uttered by women. And it was just the truth, right? They were out there, they were working hard at the job, but they still were expected to put 5 meals on the table, right, to clean the house. It wasn't a balanced equation. Thankfully, us dudes, we finally figured this out. We started being a little bit more responsible, and certainly this newest generation of dads is very, very engaged. But if you watch, in 2000, you start to see a spike. In 2000, there's 386 articles on this topic alone. You know what happened that year? There's a little piece of technology called the BlackBerry. When you see this trend line starting to go up, and now it's being something that everybody's talking about, it really happened when the barriers between work and home just fell away. I still can remember, I'm old enough, when if you wanted to log into your work email, you had to go back into the office, you had to fire up your computer, and you might even have to fire up a modem. It could take you 10 minutes. But with the introduction of the smartphone, the BlackBerry, all of a sudden our work email could arrive all day long and all evening long. The barrier between work and home absolutely went away. And I think that we, frankly, if you look at this, we struggled to adjust. The other kind of interesting moment is you're asking yourself probably, well, what happened in 2007? Well, the iPhone happened. Now, not only moms and dads, but all the students and the kids realize there's no barriers anymore. That's a good thing, but we didn't quite understand how to adapt to it. And that's one of the goals of this section that we're going to be going through, is how do we manage the lack of barriers between our work and our home life so that we can effectively enjoy a lot of success in both. So the idea that we came up with is the idea of counterbalancing. So waiting for this, there we go. So if you think about the line in the middle, you see a red line and a black line zigzagging over the middle. That middle dotted line that lies exactly between those two, let's just call that this imagined place called balance. Nobody actually stays there. We just move through it. We go past it and go the other way. People who really try to consciously be balanced in the traditional sense, what happens is they never really go long. They never go very far away from that sense of being in balance. And as far as your home life goes, awesome. I actually applaud that. When we get to the end of this, you realize we never want you to go very far out of balance at home. There's too big of a cost. The problem was, if you never go very far, if you never give anything extreme, extraordinary effort and focus, you don't get extraordinary results. And the problem with living in the middle is you will get results that fall in the middle, are average. This is a recipe for average. You have to go long. Well, there are people who get that, and they get that absolutely. And they try to live at the extremes on both sides of the equation. You can see it on your screen now. They go long at work. They're willing to give their one thing, the thing that matters most, absolute focus and attention at the expense of other stuff. They will absolutely go there, and they will push for bigger and bigger results. And I'll say, from the work standpoint, way to go. Success is kind of messy. You have to be comfortable with chaos. You have to say no to things. We talk about that in The Thieves. Work, big success, demands that you move out to the extremes. The problem is, if you're not properly counterbalancing, your life will move to the extremes too. And I don't mean this in the positive sense. This is not someone who is pushing themselves to achieve, to run a marathon, or to hike, to the top of Everest, right? We get out of balance in a positive way when we pursue big goals in our personal life. What happens here most often is because people are pursuing work, their life has gotten madly out of balance as a consequence. It's not a conscious decision. It's something that's happened as a consequence. So you start to see symptoms of this. One of the stories that Gary shared when we were writing the book is that an executive came to interview with him. And this fellow was incredibly accomplished. And he was in probably, the last part of his career. He had achieved many things and decided to take a huge period of time off to travel around the world with his family. And when he walked in and started talking to Gary, he said, my kids are 16 now. I'm just taking a big chunk of time so we can travel the world. I've got to recapture all that lost time. And he said it inclusively, as if Gary had done this as well. He said, I missed a lot of birthdays. I didn't get to go on some family vacations because I was doing this for my family. And Gary's aha was that this person had placed a bet with his time, that he was going to ignore the important things in his life, banking or betting on his ability to recapture them later. And the truth is, if you bet your life on betting time in this way, it's a bet that you just simply can't cover. This guy got lucky. He got that time back, but nobody can count on that. You don't have a deal with God that it knows that you'll be able to come back and recapture that lost time. And besides, and I know this, starting to learn this from experience, a 6-year-old's birthday party is very different from a 7-year-old's and 8-year-old's or a 9-year-old's. So the things that you missed, you simply missed. You don't get them back. So when we look at this, understand that you can push yourself at work, but don't allow your life to be caught in the crosshairs. So at the end of the day, I want to encourage you to look at your life a little differently. When you think about the 7 circles, I want you to go long professionally in your business. What's the one thing that's driving your career? Can you give that disproportionate time? What's the one thing that's driving your business? Can you give that disproportionate time? It's okay. It'll make some messes. You may miss a meeting or two. You might get your hand slapped in the office for not showing up at this or that. But if you're getting extraordinary results, that is how people move ahead. That is how businesses leapfrog their competitors, by willing to absolutely focus on their one thing. On the other side, in your life, you're constantly going to be counterbalancing. If you have to work for a long weekend to meet a big deadline, it's absolutely okay, and you need to give yourself permission to say, you know what, I worked the entire weekend. I need to take a couple of days off, or you know what, I'm going to take a half day. I'm going to surprise the kids and pick them up from work. The kids up from school, right? You can counterbalance and recapture time. You can go and take a little time to relax. You can make sure that you're working out when you're on the road. There's things that you can do so that you're attending to all the areas of your life, even when you're focused on a big goal. It's when you neglect those things that there's some fragility that shows up that you really don't want to pay the price. So we did this quote, and it's probably, if you've got a Kindle and you have our book on Kindle, one of the features I really love is you can see where other people have underlined in the book. And this quote from James Patterson is one of the most underlined sections in the entire book. Now I'm just going to read it to you so you can understand why we say go long at work. It's okay to go to the extreme, but not at home. So James writes it this way. Imagine life as a game in which you are juggling 5 balls. The balls are called work, family, health, friends, and integrity. And you're keeping all of them in the air. But one day you finally come to understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. The other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and integrity, are made of glass. If you drop one of these, it will be irrevocably scuffed, nicked, perhaps even shattered. I love that. It's incredibly poignant, but it underscores this idea that our professional lives are quite resilient. In fact, success is built into the DNA of people who are willing to let the ball drop, right? That they're willing to go long and go a little bit extreme. But the other areas of our life, time spent with our family, our friends, attending to our health, to our spiritual needs, those are things that you just can't neglect for too long. It's not a success recipe. It's actually a recipe for regrets. So let's circle back. Now that I've kind of walked you through that, and hopefully you're getting a sense of how can I be a more active counterbalancer, not just in all of those areas, but particularly for me. That's what we're here about. How can I attend to me, my personal life? So before I can suggest some ideas from our research, ideas that should apply to most of the people, if you don't have something going on, I can suggest something that might fit you. But I'll just kind of share what my answers were when I first started down this road. In the very beginning, those of you who know the story of my wife and I, Wendy, we had 2 kids 17 months apart, 2 kids in diapers. That was a really tough period. And Gary gave us some really good advice. We're sitting there and we're sleepless and we're arguing over things that we'd rather not argue over because, you got little babies in the house, right? And you can't take it out on them, but we would take it out on each other. And he just said, y'all need, when you're ready to have a babysitter, you need to establish a date night. And we took him at his word and we tried it out. We couldn't afford to do it super often, but we knew we wanted to make it a ritual. And I'm going to underscore that word, ritual. So we started out, like most people, trying to get babysitters on Friday and Saturday night, right? We wanted to go out with each other after work was done. Well, here's the deal. Anybody who's really tried to go out and get a babysitter, where is the demand the highest, right? Demand for babysitters is Friday and Saturday night. So we weren't consistently able to build a ritual around any particular activities on the weekend. The moment we made the decision to have our date night on a Wednesday night, we were able to make it a habit. And we've been really consistent now for, gosh, 6, 7 years of really trying to make sure that at least once a week we get some time to spend time with each other. Because that is the most important key, at least in my recent memory, for my personal life. My wife is my best friend. I want to spend time with that person and go and have fun and have some fun time. In other areas, I've set goals, literally set goals on, I'm going to take this many fishing trips. I'm going to be in the outdoors. And I've made rituals around those things. For those that know my group of friends, they know that the first weekend of December is our fishing trip. And we take it every year. It's a ritual. We know to expect it. We know it's coming. We can plan for it. And we can plan our work around it. I've also known people who've established other ones. Gary shared with me when he was really trying to carve out one-on-one time with his son, they just established Dude's Night Out. It ended up becoming a default movie night. But it was a ritual on Thursday nights. They would say, what movie you want to go see? And they would always have that time together. And that was also good for him because, Gary, he was very nose to the grindstone for many, many years. For him to go and just chill out and watch a movie, which is one of my favorite activities too, it's a big deal. And other more solitary things like reading and stuff, you can actually write down and say, you know what, I'm just going to tackle it at this time. The goal here is to think, how can I do something consistent so that I'm always attending to my own needs and getting that part of me fulfilled, so I don't ever feel like I just neglected myself for too long. Well, the research would show that a lot of these things line up. The number one thing then when you ask about the health of people's personal life is, do you have a hobby? People who have hobbies tend to have really high rates of happiness. It's an area of their life where they're trying to pursue mastery. It's something they really love to do. And so we ask the question, of all the hobbies, right, that you could choose, what would be the one hobby that we could recommend that would maybe be the most beneficent for your life? There's lots of them out there. There are people that take up rockets and model airplanes, fly fishing, all kinds of things that they do for themselves. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's something like yoga that you really want to pursue for yourself that might also be your physical habit. Whatever that is, you need to pick it. One that we can recommend absolutely is reading. My goodness, it's what we would want our children to do with some of their spare time, but we don't always do it for ourselves. And research absolutely backs up this choice. People who read books, their brains get wired differently. They recently did some research, and they had a whole bunch of people, I think it was, I want to say, a few dozen, read a novel based around the volcano in Italy, and I'm forgetting the name right now, Pompeii. Right? It was just a thriller, but what they did is they hooked them up to a brainwave machine. And every day they looked at them reading and how their brain waves would change. And then after they finished the book, they kept doing it. And what they noticed is that people's brains were measurably altered for as many as 5 days after they finished a book. They literally were seeing and experiencing the world differently because they'd read really a cheap thriller. Now translate that to some of the great books that we get to read. What about some of the great books that are about helping ourselves? Hey, the one thing, I would throw that in there. How does that change our brains for the better? It's essential for childhood development. So you really want your kids to do this. They can't really pursue math if they can't read the textbook, right? It's a foundational skill that helps them everywhere. It also helps you relax. It actually relaxes people. Just 6 minutes of reading, 68% more than things like going for a walk or getting some exercise. It's an amazing thing to kind of lower the old blood pressure. Just get you calm after a hard day. Just open up a book and give yourself 5 or 10 minutes. And it keeps your brain working as you age. People who take reading as a habit tend to have 15% less incidence of memory loss. So I hope that you've gotten some ideas here. And before we go to the Q&A, and I bring Ian back to us, we're about right on time here, I want to challenge you to think and ask the question, what's the one thing that you can do in your personal life that you can do, not could do, that you can do right now to start giving yourself some time back that would make everything else easier or necessary? Chances are the moment you ask that question, you had an idea. but maybe you didn't buy into it. Maybe somebody else in your brain was saying, you know what, you don't have time for that. You can't make time for that. I want to challenge you to carve out a really small increment of time to start pursuing that hobby. And I'll tell you a quick story. I actually met a young person about 3 weeks ago at a class that Gary was teaching for young people. It was a KW Kids Cares class, and she wanted to start writing. And we asked the question, and then we used Pareto's principle, and what we discovered is that if she really wanted to pursue this hobby as, you know, a newlywed with a young special needs child, she also had a full-time job, and she wanted to write. That the best time to do this, the time that she could control consistently and form a habit, was going to be in the mornings. And really, if you look at success, it's amazing how many successful people pursue their hobbies and their passions before 8 o'clock in the morning. So we just set a simple goal, and I checked in on her just last week. She just started setting her clock earlier, and she said it had already had a domino run impact in her life. She had more energy. She was more positive because all of a sudden she'd found this pocket of time just 30 or 40 minutes earlier in the morning that had given her hope that she could start pursuing something that was very, very deeply important to her. So make a commitment to go carve out a piece of time that you can control. It's probably going to be in the morning, right? It's probably going to be before the rest of the world's up. And start attending to the things that are really important to you, hobbies, whatever that might be. And so now I'm going to hand it back to Ian, and I'd love to take some questions, some specific questions that you guys might have about how you can start counterbalancing between your work and your personal life. So Ian, why don't you step in real quick and handle some more business, and we'll get to the Q&A.
Thanks, Jay. That was great. Yes, please feel free to ask your questions in the questions panel of your GoToWebinar interface. Jay's really wanting to ask your personal questions, so please take the time to do that now. But before we move on to our Q&A session, there is one more poll question for you. If you could please take the time to answer it, we really appreciate your responses. And again, I will give you a few moments to complete this poll.
All right, folks, while y'all are completing that, be thinking of a question and just type it in. I'm really happy to field any questions you might have. We're going to give folks a couple of seconds to finish this and type in a few questions.
Well, we're back. Going to close here the poll. Thanks so much again for your feedback and your answers. We are really hoping to get some of the audience's questions, but since we haven't gotten some, then I'll ask Jay actually a question that comes up again and again when we do these events, and it is Jay, how do I know when I have different things that I feel are as important? How do I know to prioritize the one for my personal life? How do I know which one is the one thing? Is there a way to find this out?
You know, a lot of times, Ian, that's a great question, and it really does come up a lot, and I'm not surprised someone asked you that before we got on this. What happens is people look at their list, right? And it's the same trap we fall into all the time. Of all the things that we could do, there's only a handful that we should do, and you have to ask the question, what's the one thing I can do today, tomorrow, that would mean the most to me? So you have to use the focusing question to kind of narrow it down. I actually don't have answers for people, but I've had people walk up to me and say, hey, this is what I want. Do you think this is what I should do? And this is the advice I give them. I say, follow your instincts. Statistically, people are right better than 60% of the time. And that means that just following your gut is better than flipping a coin. So just trust your instincts a little bit and understand that you're now moving in the right direction. One of the most hopeful things that people can do is start making progress. Start making progress towards something that's important to them. And that's a big deal, right? You get out there, you're learning from that experience, and then you can course correct. Just start moving in the right direction. All right, it looks like we've got another question. What's that, Ian?
Yes, Mary asks, I I find it difficult to stick to time blocking because of distractions. Any advice to stay on schedule?
Well, the advice I mentioned there is if you're having trouble with distractions, I would look at your environment first. Are you time blocking your time in the right place? I ran into a lady, and she struggled to actually do her most important work in the office. So she started bringing like a rolling suitcase with her laptop in it, and she would set up a laptop in a training room nearby because that was free from distractions. My old EA, Sarah, when we were working on a big project, actually found not a training room, but an often unused boardroom, and she would go there and set up her laptop to do her work. You can do the same trick in your home life, right? Is there a place there, a bunker, as we call it in the book, where you can go where you have a lot fewer distractions? Maybe you need to turn off your phone. Maybe you need to turn off some of the background stuff, your email notifications. Find a place, first and foremost, that you can work undisturbed, and then find a time. I honestly believe that there are very few things demanding our time early in the morning, and if it's really important, you can do it then. So, Mary, those would be my two advice. Try to find a better bunker, and then if that doesn't completely do it, start doing it earlier and earlier, and you'll find that other people are still on Facebook and goofing off, and you can do your work.
Here's another one from Bill. He asks, I tend to work at 2-3 things at once. Am I the only one? It's contrary to the one thing approach, isn't it?
Thanks, Bill. Yes, you need to look at multitasking is a lie. I know it's very hard to do functionally, is to absolutely avoid multitasking when most of our offices and our homes are basically a circus of multitasking, right? Inefficiency. It's really crazy how many things we expect to do at once. I would ask the question, why is this important to you? And what is the cost of not doing it? If the cost is high enough, you'll stop doing more than one thing at once. So ask the question maybe differently. You know, what's the one thing that I'm not doing that if it did do would give me the greatest possible results? You're not doing it. It's something that you're not doing, and the problem isn't painful enough right now for you to fix. So good luck with that. It's a habit that you formed, and just start weeding away. So if you're doing 3 things at once, try 2 things before you do 1 thing, all right? Just knock it away, chip at it, and make some progress.
Thanks for all your questions. We're trying to get to as many as we can. Now we really have a good queue of questions. So here's the next one. Haluk wonders, do you think your one thing for your personal life would conflict with your business goals?
It's possible theoretically. I'm making sure that I've got it. What's the name? Is it Haluk? Thanks, Haluk, for that question. It's possible that your personal one thing might conflict with your work goals. Hopefully not. I've not run into that, but I can imagine it's possible. It would be possible if the only time that you could pursue that thing was during work hours, right? I know that people get fired for doing personal work in the office. That's probably not a great formula for getting ahead. So you have to ask the question, you know, if it's really important to me, when can I do it? But I have known people that are in pursuit of, you know, running goals and sports goals, or maybe they really, really, truly want to coach a team or pursue an Olympic goal or whatever that is in their personal life, have been willing to make sacrifices in their professional career. A lot of times the achievements that they achieve give them such confidence that they leap forward after that pause. So I think it's definitely possible. I hope that's not the case for you. And I would just ask the question, if I can't do it during work, when could I do it and still get the same results? I think if you just keep asking the question, you can find your solution.
This next one comes from Mark, and he says, I've never been a morning person and find that my real productivity period is late afternoon. Could you address that?
All right, that's a good one. I'll tell you this, I'm a writer, right? So I got my master's in writing. If there had been a Facebook back then, you could probably find pictures of me with a ponytail and John Lennon glasses, and I definitely was a night owl. It's a habit that you've learned to be really productive at a certain time, and I know that we all have our own rhythms, but you can also learn to be more productive in the morning, and there's a lot of research that proves that. I've coached a lot of people that were struggling with interference in the afternoon to actually start finding different times that were better for them, and it's often in the morning. That is my go-to time. I've got a real bias for it because I changed my own behavior. I found that when I tried to do things in the afternoon or in the evening, life can happen. There can be fires that really are urgent and have to be addressed. They don't happen often before noon, and they really don't happen often before 8 a.m. So I want to just say, if that's your productive time and you really want to stick to it, then you need a really good bunker. You may have to turn off your cell phone and turn off your text. You may have to do a lot of extraordinary other things to make that time consistent over time, because you will get sniped, and that's what we call it, getting sniped, because you're in the middle of everybody else's run time, and if they have an emergency, they're knocking on your door. So hopefully you can navigate that, and if not, just start experiment by moving it up a little bit and see if you can't make the adaptation. It took me a little while, but I kind of now turn on the creative juices a lot earlier in the day, and I've seen a lot of people do it with a lot of different endeavors.
Here's another great question from Brian. He says, my question is, I'm currently using the 66-day challenge to focus on my personal health, but I'm tempted to have more than one 66-day challenge going on at the same time. Any thoughts on this approach?
I think that you have to listen to your results. The 66 days is an average. And what we know, because we dissected the results, right? It takes 66 days on average to form a habit. And that's why we have the 66-day challenge. But we know that there were habits that people actually formed, and this was from the baseline data, in as little as 18 days. Others took as many as 250. So you have to ask the question, do I feel like this habit, this health habit, is truly ingrained? And do I feel comfortable risking adding another one on top? Because what often happens if you do it too soon, the first one becomes untied. So I would tell you a stitch in time and pay attention to that first habit. If it's about getting up early, say, because that's come up already on this call, when you start waking up and you're around or near your target time for waking up on days that you didn't set the alarm, you know that your body is now geared itself to wake up then. It happens to a lot of us when we have a new work schedule or a new school schedule. We get programmed, and it takes a certain amount of time. When you feel that happening, I think that's when you can slot in the next one. I try to be real disciplined and only have one at a time, because when I've been ambitious and tried two, neither of it's worked out very well. So please try to stay to the course and just listen to when you're getting results. A good friend of mine, this will be the last thing I say on that, was trying to quit smoking. And she got to the end of her 66-day challenge, and we all gave her high fives. And I said, what now? And she was ready to go to the next one, because she'd actually done all 66 days. And I asked her if she wouldn't consider doing it again. And she did another 66 days on quitting smoking. And I remember her coming up to me, it was around day 105 or something, and she said, it happened. If I hadn't done it the second time, I don't think I would have truly quit. But I realized just like last week that I'm now a non-smoker, but it took me that extra time. So really, depending on what you're trying to do, stick with it until you feel like it's stuck.
So here's a follow-up to another question. Rob says, I'm the opposite of Luke. I have highly productive in the afternoon. My late afternoon is my low/tired time. What should I do during my low time to keep myself going?
All right. Well, this is about willpower. And so if you take a look at the chapter about willpower being on will call, everybody, if you just looked at the biorhythms of every modern worker, right, we have to go to work for this kind of artificially long period of time after lunch, and it's like that 1 to 3 o'clock windows, I'm guessing, when you're hitting it. Everybody goes through a low energy period. What we learned in our research, that a lot of your inability to focus is nutrition based. So if you're actually feeding your body quality foods, and I would really encourage you to think that you need complex carbohydrates, things like proteins that break down and feed your bloodstream for long periods of time, you won't see as uneven of a shift in the afternoon. If you eat a heavy lunch, most of your blood leaves, and goes down to digest that food. And so you literally can have an energy deficiency during this process, and people will go through that crash. So, I try to avoid spiking things with high sugar foods. Caffeine will increase the blood flow to your brain, which is why you feel like you're more focused, but you're actually sucking the sugar out of your brain faster. And that is the fuel that gives you willpower. So I would say take a look at, maybe keep a food diary for a week and ask the question, what am I eating in the morning and at lunch that might be contributing to my not being as productive as I could be in the afternoon? because that is often where a lot of people hit that horrible lull. I mean, I personally, there are days when I want to curl up under my desk and just take a nap. That's pretty universal, but I keep power bars, and I eat apples and nuts, and I try to have a little snack at 10 a.m. and one snack around 2 p.m., and that usually helps me keep my focus for the full day. That's a great question. Thanks for asking it.
I think we have time for a couple more, and this one comes from Clark, who is a college student. So he says, I'm a college student that has to read, and some more for my classes. I really want to read more books that, in parentheses, he says that I really want to read, but as of now, it's not really worth my social time. Do you think I should keep putting off my quote-unquote me reading until school is out, or start carving out the time today? As much as I like to read, I only have so many hours I can sit alone in a day. Would you suggest it's worth it?
Well, again, I think that's a great question. I think, and I lived that. When I got my master's degree, there were so many books that I had to read that I felt like I didn't have much time or energy to read some of the books that I really wanted to read. So I've absolutely felt your pain. I think you've got two options. It sounds like you've made a choice that the more important domino for you is to actually have time with your friends. And that may be a trade-off that for this period of time you're willing to take. But I would ask the question, how much is enough, and where could I find that time? Are you really being as efficient with your time as you could be? Most of the time, if I ask people to actually map out their day and really spend time questioning, is that really how long you spend at lunch? Is that really how long you do this? You can find 30 minutes pretty easily. So maybe look at a ritual. For a while there, I was trying to be a little bit more aggressive on my goals, and I just set a goal to read one chapter or for 30 minutes, whichever came first, and do that first thing at a certain trigger in my day. Like that was for me when the kids went to bed. And I was going to absolutely make sure that I made that little bit of progress to start increasing things. So pick a page count. You know, I find in novels and stuff that at least getting a chapter under your belt or 30 minutes is enough. I bet you can find 30 minutes and just get some relaxation reading time, and it might be what you do over your coffee. Maybe you have to give up a newspaper or the internet or Facebook. You may have to make a trade-off, say no to something to say yes to that. And that would be of the choices. I would encourage you to look for that first before just putting it off much longer, because I felt your pain, man, and it really is nice to get back and just have some of those books that you love. That is my hobby.
And here's the final one from Joe. He says, how do you get your spouse or partner to understand your priorities when it comes to what it is the most important to you, that one thing?
All right. Well, Joe, that's a great question. And getting buy-in from people who have a say in your life is a big part of it. And I mentioned in passing, and I even had in my notes, I can remember when I was trying to set up, like, with our business world exploding, with our children, getting permission. And I call it permission because we have a permission-based relationship on many things. You know, we're able to do whatever we want, but it pays to be in a relationship to check off. I want to go fishing for a weekend down on the coast. I want to travel and maybe go hunting or in the outdoors. And I don't know what it is about being a dude, but there's sometimes like fantasy football league draft. There's some guys' nights that don't involve the family. And getting those on the calendar early was the best thing that I ever was able to do to make that work more smoothly. Because when people know to expect things, and they do feel like special things, then they're much more willing to do it. And my goal was always to try to reciprocate and encourage her to do the same. It doesn't always work out that way. I think I have more hobbies, but that's the way it is right now. So I would start with really communicating why it's important to you and what the time commitment would be well in advance, and letting your spouse or partner, because this applies to both sides, discuss it with you in a non-judgmental way. Because there are hobbies that frankly can take too much time from those things, and you have to sometimes reprioritize the order of things. You know, my wife is pursuing some running goals, which means that on the weekends that she's going running, and I have a choice. I could then lose another hour with my family, or I could go then. And I just chose to pursue another short-term goal until she finishes her race, and then I might pick up my running goals again. We can take turns. It is a relationship, and there is give and take. So I wish I could be more specific. It's really about the specific hobby you're talking about and how much time it takes away from your spouse and how you can communicate that. But it is about communication and setting expectations and helping them understand why. Because they really love you and it's really important to you, they're going to want it to happen, and they'll help you find a solution. So that's a long-winded answer, but hopefully it'll at least point you down the road to finding some solutions. Now, it looks like we're at the end of our time here, Ian. I'm going to hand it back to you, and before you do, I just want to say thank you for helping host.
Yeah, we have reached the end of our webinar. We thank you for participating and hope that you have enjoyed it. Jay, are there any other final words you'd like to say?
No, I'm easy to find. If you Google me, Jay Papazan, and you did not get your questions answered, know that we're going to try to do this at least once a month. So you should be able to come and enjoy our next webinar and get a question that wasn't answered. You can also reach out to me on social media. I really do try to make time every day. It's part of my rituals to answer questions that people send to me, because if you're trying to live this book, I certainly want to help you do that. So thank you for giving us your time today, and just reach out if you have further questions.
Thanks, Jay, and again, thanks to all of you who joined us. Upon leaving the webinar, please, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. So if you could please take the time to do this, we really would love to get your feedback. On your screen right now, you can see a slide with the next steps. So within 1 day, you'll be receiving an email, and this email will include a link to so you can download your personal workbook and you can discover your one thing. And on this same email, you'll get a link to the recording of this webinar. Please feel free to share this link with your friends and family, because we really want you to share the one thing with your relationships. And do not forget also to visit our website. If you want to find out more valuable resources from the one thing, you can find the site address in the slide on your screen right now. And also make sure to follow us on Twitter to learn about the future webinars and other events that we're having. Our handles are on the slide that you're seeing right now. And also, please continue the conversation with us. If you have questions that were not answered, you can use the hashtag that is on the screen, the one thing, and we'll get back to you. Again, thank you for participating, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.